God bless you, dear ones. Welcome to the Word with Chester. Today we will continue studying the 12th chapter of the book of Second Samuel. In our last lesson, we read down to, I believe, about verse 20 in chapter 12. Today we're going to start our reading again at verse 19. But let me give you a recap before we start reading today what had transpired. Well, Nathan the prophet had went down to talk to David. God had revealed to him that David had committed a very bad sin. And for those of you that was not with us in our last couple of lessons, we find that David did commit a terrible sin. Actually, he committed more than one sin, but if you lump them all together, it got worse than bad. Well, David had walking on the top of his roof of his own house, he looked over and he saw a beautiful woman bathing herself, and actually she was naked, bathing herself. And David looked over when he saw her. Instead of him just seeing a beautiful woman, as I told you on another occasion, it's not a sin to see and notice a beautiful woman, but when you act on it and take it further, which David did, it actually becomes sin. When number one, lust, the Bible said, when lust is conceived, it brings forth sin. When sin is finished, it brings forth death. So David looked over and saw her, and he acted on it. He sent and inquired of her, and actually he brought her over and he had sex with her. And having sex, the woman conceived. She had a child. And the another part of this sin, the woman was married to another man. She was married to a man named Uriah. And so David committed adultery at point blank. You can't make it any plainer than that. And you got to get the picture. Sometime when we're reading Old Testament, we say that was before the law, but this was after the law. So you got to get the picture. It was known and everyone knew that adultery was a sin. David went into her and had sex with her. That was adultery. And she conceived a child. But instead of him just stopping there, he tried to cover that up by sending to get the woman's husband, Uriah, and bringing him back to Jerusalem, and hoping that he would go in and sleep with his wife, and therefore the child could be blamed on him. And to make a long story short, he did not go into his wife. Because of his loyalty, he stayed there at the king's palace, awaiting on instructions, I'm assuming. But yet, because he did not go back to sleep with his wife, David couldn't put this child off on him. So David sent word to his commander to send him on the front line, and where the battle was most hot, and he had Uriah sent on the front line, and Uriah was killed. So that means David was guilty of adultery, and he's also now guilty of murder. Even though he did not pull the sword to kill Uriah, he put him in position to be killed. So he was guilty of killing Uriah, and so his sins, God saw what he was doing, and you have to understand that God sees everything that we do. Sometimes we think that we've gotten by, but God sees and God knows. God is not pleased with a lot of things that we do, but there's some things that gets His attention, and He knows when you do wrong. And so God sent word and dropped the word in the prophet Nathan's heart, and Nathan went down to talk to David about it, and he went in, and instead of approaching the king abruptly, he went through a parable. He said there was a poor man, that had one little lamb, and he loved the little lamb. And in so many words, it was the family pet. The family loved this lamb, and it was the only lamb he had. The lamb was like one of his own daughters, the Bible says. And so that's how close of a relationship the lamb and this poor man had. But yet there was another man there that had flocks of sheep and also had herds of cattle. And there came someone to his house to visit him, and he went and got the one little lamb that the other man had and killed it. And fed to his guest. The prophet told this parable to David, and David said, "Who would do such a thing? If I find this man, I'll kill him." And David went through it because he was so angry at someone doing this to another person. And the prophet Nathan just told David, "Thou art the man, you are the man." Then he went on to tell him about his sin, that he had Uriah killed, and all that David had done wrong. And David, after the prophet had told him all of these things, David repented. He said, "I have sinned against the Lord." And Nathan said to David that the Lord had put away thy sin. In other words, the Lord wasn't going to take the kingdom away from him like he did Saul, but yet he's going to have to go through punishments for his sin. And the prophet prophesied that David's son was going to die. And then after the prophet went on back to his house, Nathan went back to his house, the child actually got sick, and David knew what the prophet had said, and he went and fasted and laid with his face to the ground for 7 days. Because he was asking God, and we're going to read now why David did go fast that 7 days in just a moment, but he fasted because he wanted this child to live. In verse 19, but when David saw that his servant whispered, when he saw that his servants whispered, David perceived that the child was dead. Therefore David said unto his servants, "Is the child dead?" And they said, "He is dead." So at this time that prophecy had come to pass, that the child died, just like the prophet had said he would die. In verse 20, and David arose from the earth and washed and anointed himself and changed his apparel and came into the house of the Lord and worshiped. Then he came to his own house, and when he required, they set food before him, and he did eat. Well, he come off of his fast after this child had died. In verse 21, then said his servants unto him, "What thing is this that thou hast done? Thou didst fast and weep for the child while it was alive, but when the child was dead, thou did rise and eat." So what is that? What are they saying? In other words, after the child died, they were expecting him to go into mourning for the child and maybe fast then. So they're asking David, "Why did you fast before this?" In verse 22, and he said, "While the child was yet alive, I fasted and wept." For I said, who can tell whether God will be gracious to me that the child may live? In other words, I did it, I prayed and I fasted, hoping that God would change his mind and not take this child from me. As we read in verse 23, but now he is dead. Why should I fast? Can I bring him back? Can I bring him back again? Question mark. So David is letting them know, I can't bring the child back again, but he goes on to say, I shall go to him, but he shall not return to me. So can you get this picture? David is saying, I will go to my son, but he will not come to me. In other words, he's crossed over now. He's dead. I'm going to die one of these days, and I'll go be where he is, but he can't come back here. So why should I continue David fasting, because that's why David was fasting, because he thought God would have mercy and not take the child as the prophet had prophesied. In verse 24, and David comforted Bathsheba his wife, and went in unto her, and lay with her, and she bore a son, and he called his name Solomon, and the Lord loved him. The Lord loved Solomon. Can you get the picture? Well, number one, the other child was dead, but this child did not die. Get the picture. This child, God loved him. He loved Solomon, and we're going to read more about Solomon. Can you get this? If the first child would have been born through Bathsheba, then it would have been in contingency to be heir to the throne. And you got to understand God. God knows what he's doing. That was not the child to be heir of a throne. She was married with another man when she conceived that child. But yet, God loves Solomon. Can you get this picture? And God loved him. The Lord loved him. Now, verse 25, and he sent word by the hand of Nathan, the prophet, and he called his name Jedediah, because of the Lord. He went and got the prophet. I guess can you get the picture? And the prophet gave him a name as well, and they called him Jedediah, because of the Lord. Now, let's read in verse 26. And Joab fought against Reba, and Joab fought against Reba of the children of Ammon, and took the royal city. Well, they took the royal city, fighting against Ammon. And Joab sent messengers to David and said, I have fought against Reba, and have taken the city of waters. The city of waters. What are we talking about? The city of waters. The city of waters. Let's talk about that now. The city of waters is actually where the Euphrates comes on one side. I believe the Tigris River comes around on the other side. The city of waters. Can you get the picture? This city where the commerce would go on in such a manner, where commerce would happen, and people would buy and people would sell, and many things happen in that city. Can you get the picture? The city of waters. Joab was letting David, I've captured the city of waters now. In verse 28, now therefore gather the rest of the people together, and encamp against the city, and take it, lest I take the city, and it be called after thy name. Joab was very loyal to David, so he was letting him know, you go and you take that. Otherwise, if I go and take it, this city is going to be named after me. So Joab sent this word unto David. Verse 29, and David gathered all the people together and went to Reba, and fought against it, and took it, and he took their king's crown from his head, the weight of which was a talent of gold with precious stones, and it was set to David's head, and he brought forth the spoils of the city in great abundance. After he fought, he got this crown. You got to get the picture. The crown arrayed with gold, and the weight of measurements of it was given. But get that now. I hope you're understanding. And David gathered the people together, and he took their king crown from his head, the weight of which was a talent of gold with the precious stones, and it was set on David's head. The king of this great city was set on David's head now. And he brought forth the spoils of the city in great abundance. In verse 31, and he brought forth the people who were in it and put them to labor with saws and with harrows of iron and with axes of iron, and made them toil at the brickinal. Shall we continue? Thus did he unto all the cities of the children of Ammon. So David and all the people returned to Jerusalem. Can you get that now? David took this city, and this particular city was a great city of commerce, and he put that king's crown upon his head. In other words, he is the ruler there now, not only of all Israel, but this was encompassed with this now is part of Israel. I hope you can understand what we're saying now. And we're going to continue reading a while in verse 13, and now we're going to see here now the consequences of David's sin, Ammon's crime. Now we're going the consequences of David's sin. David had sinned a great sin, and you have to understand that there is always consequences of sin, and nobody wants to go through those consequences, but they happen. When you sin, you're going to have to go through whatever the consequences is of that sin, and this is the situation here. David had the prophecy had went forth, and God had said what was going to be, and so David has to face those consequences now because of his sin. And you got to get the picture. God said it was going to happen, so it had to happen. Now let's read in verse 13. And it came to pass after this that Absalom, the son of David, had a fair sister whose name was Tamar, and Ammon, the son of David, loved her. Can you get the picture? This particular young girl, was named Tamar. And Absalom saw her. I'll read 13:1 again. And it came to pass after this that Absalom, the son of David, had a fair sister. He had a fair sister. Now this was a sister of David, whose name was Tamar, and Ammon, the son of David, loved her. Can you get the picture? Now, it's not the same as it is today, but Absalom was actually her full-blood sister, a brother to Tamar, and the other young man named Ammon. He was also a son of David, but they were not full blood sister and brother. Now, verse 2, and Ammon was so distressed that he fell sick for his sister Tamar, for she was a virgin, and Ammon thought it hard for him to do anything to her. Well, he fell sick. He loved her that much. He thought he loved her that much. Verse 3, but Ammon had a friend whose name was Jonadab, the son of Shema, David's brother, and Jonadab was a very subtle man. And he said unto him, why art thou, being the king's son, lean from day to day? Why are you in the mental state that you're in? Wilt thou not tell me? And Ammon said unto him, I love Tamar, my brother Absalom's sister. Verse 5, and Jonadab said unto him, lay thee down on thy bed, and pretend that thou art sick. And when thy father cometh to see thee, say unto him, I pray thee, let my sister Tamar come and give me food, and prepare the food in my sight, that I may see it and eat it at her hand. And so Ammon lay down and prepared that he was sick. And when the king was come to see him, Ammon said unto the king, I pray thee, let Tamar my sister come and make a couple of cakes in my sight, that I may eat at her hand. Can you get the picture? This other guy put this in his head to do this, and he's going to follow it through now. And he said this to his father. Then David sent home to Tamar, saying, Go now to thy brother Ammon's house and prepare a meal for him. So Tamar went to her brother's Ammon's house, and he was laid down, and she took flour and kneaded it, and made cakes of his in his sight, and did bake the cakes. In verse 9, and she took a pan and poured them out before him, and he refused to eat. And Ammon said, Send out all men from me, and they went out every man from him. Can you get the picture of what he's doing now? And Ammon said to Tamar, Bring me food into the chamber, that I may eat it of thine hand. And Tamar took the cakes which she had made and brought them into the chamber of Ammon, her brother. And when she had brought them unto him to eat, he took hold of her, and he said unto her, Come, lie with me, my sister. Come and lie with me, my sister. So he wanted to have sex with her. So that's what the whole thing was plotted up for. He wanted to have sex with her. He said to her, Come and lie with me, my sister. And she answered, Nay, my brother, do not force me, for no such thing ought to be done in Israel. Do not thou this folly. In other words, don't do this. Don't force me to do such a thing. This should not be done in all of Israel. Can you see the sister Tamar pleading with him? Now, I'll read 12 again. And she said unto him, Nay, my brother, do not force me, for no such thing ought to be done in Israel. Do not thou this folly. Don't do this shameful thing. Verse 13, and I shall I cause my shame to go. In other words, don't take my virginity, and shall I cause my shame to go. And as for thee, thou shalt be as one of the fools in Israel. She's letting him know everything that would be if he would try to do such a thing. Now, therefore, I pray thee, speak unto the king, for he will not withhold me from thee. In other words, all she's saying is just do it right. If you go talk to the king, he'll give me to you as your wife, but don't force me to have sex with you and take my virginity away from me under these pretenses. Can you get this picture? Howbeit, he would not hearken unto her voice, but being stronger than she, forced her and lay with her. Can you get the picture? He raped her. Might as well tell it like it is. He raped her. And you got to get the picture. God is never pleased with such a thing as that. Get the picture. God is never pleased with that, with a thing like that. In verse 15, then Ammon hated her exceedingly, so that the hatred with which he hated her was greater than the love which he had loved her. And Ammon said unto her, Arise and be gone. Can you get the picture? After he raped her, the love that he had for her was gone, because she did not want this to be. And she tried to explain to him that he could do it the right way. In other words, if you do it the right way, we can come to the conclusion that you want, but don't rape me. And he raped her. I want you to also get the picture that what the prophet had said. Now, in the lesson that we gave when we started chapter 12, the first lesson in chapter 12, the prophet had said, he had told David that trouble was going to break out in his own house. And this was because of his own sin. This is part of his punishment. The trouble is going to break out in his own house. And so Ammon raped his sister. Now, that's a terrible thing to rape anybody. And I want you to know God is never pleased with that. In verse 16, and she said unto him, there is no cause this evil in sending me away, and sending me away is greater than the other that thou should do unto me. But we would not, but he would not hearken to her. And so what is she saying? Sending me away is worse than you raping me. I was a virgin and you took my virginity, and now you're angry and you want to send me away because you've stolen the most valuable part of me, and now you want to send me away. So she's letting him